Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. Today we're going to be talking about the Students Inside Albany program that the League of Women Voters runs every year for students around New York State. My guests are Kathy Stein, who is the president of the St. Lawrence County League, and Hannah Tupper. Hannah is a senior at Canton Central High School, and she was the League's 2009 Student Inside Albany Conference attendee. So thank you both for coming in today. I'm excited to talk about this program. Kathy, let's start by telling folks what Students Inside Albany is.
Well, it's a conference, it's an interactive conference, goes on for 2.5 days. And it's intended to help, it's run by the State League of Women Voters, Education Fund, and some very generous other sponsors. And it is intended to, acquaint students with the way that our government works in Albany, also with their, the role that citizens can have in policy making, how the different kinds of forces that influence policy, legislative decisions, how the legislative process works, and that kind of thing.
Okay, and the Students Inside Albany actually has learning objectives so that students who are taking time out from regular classroom are actually gaining some pretty valuable information.
Yeah, well, we certainly like to think so. Yes, the goals are to increase the student understanding of public policy in general in New York State, to enhance student understanding of the roles of the various forces seeking to enact legislation, and there's more than just the legislators there, and policy development and changes to policy and all those forces, and to promote an increased understanding of the New York State Legislature, as I said before, through legislative shadowing experience.
Mm-hmm. So and we'll be talking with Hannah a little bit later about what exactly she did while she was at the conference this year. Kathy, can you tell us a little bit about the St. Lawrence County's League history of participation in this program? Because it's been going on for quite a while.
The program's been going on for quite a while. This is Hannah's our second student that we have sent, and we're very pleased to be, being able to get involved in the program. The next thing listeners are probably wondering are how are students chosen, and students are the representative of local leagues, and so the local leagues have a great deal of there's a lot of leeway in how they choose. So there's different local leagues do different things. We solicited applications, we circulated them among our members, and there was input. It was a very difficult decision. We had wonderful candidates, but Hannah was our choice, and we're very pleased. And then after the conference, again, local leagues have various things that they can do. Have students appear at meetings or various things, and obviously we asked Hannah to come to North Country Matters and record an interview.
And it's important to point out that in our league there are actually 17 school districts that are involved in the St. Lawrence County area, so that's a lot of potential attendees, and we're only allowed to send one, or at least we're only allowed to send one the way the financing works. But why don't you explain to folks that there is no cost to the student to go to this event, that it is picked up by the New York State League and also by the local league. Yes,
yeah. The New York State League of Women Voters Education Fund picks up the entire expenses, and again with some generous sponsors who help out. And the local league is responsible for transportation costs, but that is all, and so that it's completely free to the student.
And it's a great experience, and that's what we're going to talk about next with you, Hannah. You've just returned from it. It was just this last week. What attracted you to the Student Inside Albany experience? What made you want to apply?
Well, first my history teacher, my AP history teacher, encouraged me to apply. So I looked into it more, and I just wanted to get that insight into the behind the scenes sort of in policy making, and also to just more explore how to become a lobbyist, or how you can become active in like your own local government.
Right, right, and those are important things. The 2019 legislative season in Albany has actually been one of the busiest ones in my memory, and so for you to be able to be our student this year was probably a great, there's a lot going on in Albany, and it was a great experience. So let's go through some of the conference highlights with you. How was the conference structured, and what are some of the things that you ended up participating in?
Yeah, so we would either have classes in like the morning or just after lunch, and then in the afternoon we would go into like the Capitol building. So we had a tour there, we visited the Court of Appeals, and then we also, different days, got to shadow our own assembly person and senator. So the classes were like how you can become a lobbyist, or like how you can become more active, and organizations like NYPER came and talked to us, and different groups like that, to talk about their own policies and how they go about being active themselves. And then it was really interesting to shadow my assembly person, Robert Smuller, and our senator, Joseph Giffro,
Griffo, right.
Griffo, yes, sorry.
Senator Griffo, right.
Because they just got the majority back in the assembly to Democratic, but both of my representatives were Republicans, so it was really interesting to see that contrast, but also there wasn't like that headbutting that you see in the media. So that was really interesting, because a lot of the votes that they passed, or the laws that they passed, there was almost no opposition, and almost everyone voted in favor of those votes. So it really shows the difference between what the media portrays and what actually goes on behind the scenes, like in the
So that's interesting that you say that. So one of the things that you got a chance to do was to tour the Capitol, and those are pretty impressive buildings, aren't they?
Yes, the architecture is like amazing to look at.
So when you actually shadowed your assembly member and you shadowed your senator, were you in the offices with them, or were you able to go into the Senate chamber and the Assembly chamber and watch what was happening?
So I actually got the opportunity to sit in the chambers for both. And so with my assembly person, the atmosphere is way more relaxed, and sort of you just come and go as you please, I guess. So I got to sit right next to my assembly person, and we would go over the bills, and he would like vote, and then I also got to sit on some meetings before session started to talk about, so that they could review bills that were coming up. And then in the Senate, since my senator is the minority leader, deputy minority leader, he was a bit more busy, but I did get to sit on the meeting with his staffers, and his staffers were also very helpful in explaining things, but I did get to sit with him in the chamber, which was way more formal and way more like kind of serious, I guess, but that was also interesting to see.
And you make a good point about the difference between the atmospheres in the two chambers. In Assemblyman Smollen's case, he's a freshman assemblyman, so he's only been there since January. So, and he certainly doesn't have the seniority that Senator Griffo would have. So he's still learning a lot about the job, isn't he?
Right. He said that he was very excited to, after session ended, to go out like into the public and talk to people, and that he was still learning a lot, and his colleagues were really helpful in helping him like get to know the process and how to go about things.
And you made a good point, I think, also about how important the staffs are, because no one assembly person or no one senator can know all there is to know about all the issues. So they really rely on their staffs to do a lot of the background work, don't they? And the constant, and there a lot of times those are the ones who are actually meeting with the lobbyists, aren't they?
Yes. I actually didn't get to meet with any lobbyists, but I know other students did, and they got to like lobby their own senators or assemblymen while we were there as well.
So today, actually, the New York Health Act was being debated in the chamber, and there was a joint committee between the Assembly and the Senate who was talking about that, and that's been an issue that a lot of lobbying from a lot of different groups has occurred on. So there are times when the lobbyists are very, very active in Albany, and then there's other times when the issues don't seem to be as controversial, and so it's not, they kind of get to work more within themselves and not have to listen to a lot of outside people. So when you learned about how to be a citizen lobbyist, what did that make you think about in terms of what you could do as a citizen when it comes to influencing legislators?
Well, first thing is like voting.
Right.
Obviously, it's the easiest way to participate. and
That's
like,
a big oh yes from Kathy.
But then also, you can write letters or emails to your representatives, and you can reach out. You can you can form like a little group and have like a protest. You could go down and lobby if you wanted
Right.
to. There's like so many different things that you can do that range from just like sending a quick email to like actually going down to Albany and lobbying.
So those are important things. A lot of times people don't have much experience doing that. So the fact that students from all over the state were learning these techniques is important. Talk about the opportunity you had to interact with other students, and what that was like to meet people from all across the state.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting because I guess you don't have that much exposure to like kids that are from out of your area a lot of times, so it was really interesting to see what other people were interested in and how they thought of government. And so there's just a lot of people that were quite eloquent and like very into, how do I, sorry.
No, that's it. So they spent a lot of time thinking about these
Yeah.
issues, right?
Yeah, and they were very just like some of them came and like with the intention of lobbying their own representative from the get-go and wanted to ask their senators and representatives those hard questions. And then others were just sort of like also interested in how it all went, what the process was like. I think I was more of like learning about the process and what everything's going on versus like really lobbying my representative.
And as a government student in your high school, because that's civics is something that you take as a senior, and most seniors get to take that course. What was the big thing that surprised you the most in terms of what you thought you knew about how New York State government worked versus what you learned while you were actually down there? Was there something that stood out that was a surprise to you?
Definitely how well Republicans and Democrats work together, actually on the floor. Because like in the media, you see all this like 49, 51%, like, or they're constantly fighting, like constantly butting heads and not agreeing. But in reality, it was all very just working together. There were different meetings with like both parties, and everyone seemed to like want to represent their own district rather than go with party line.
Okay, that's encouraging to hear.
This is very heartening. This is very good to hear.
That's right. It is that there's a lot of collegiality. So Hannah, what were some of your takeaways from the conference in terms of you've had a little bit of time to think about what you learned and what you did. So what kind of sticks in your mind as some important lessons?
A lot of it happens behind the scenes that you don't see. So even being on the assembly, that was just the final steps into passing a law. Like they just introduced it, and then people voted. Whereas there was constantly like meetings and just different councils that the bill has to go through. Again, the staffers, they really know so much about what's going on and the process, and just like I feel like they get taken for granted, but they honestly do so much work.
Right. I think that's a very good point.
So I think those are the main takeaways.
Yeah, and New York State has a very active committee system, and every bill that
That's a
comes
nice way of
to
putting it.
get to the floor has to go through multiple committees, and so there's a lot of, as you say, there's a lot of meetings that has to get passed through a committee and then passed on to the next committee before it's going to get to the floor. So it's not like things haven't had a really good examination. It just doesn't become a law kind of willy-nilly. So what do you think, Hannah, that you learned from this experience that will help you going forward? You're going to go to college. And perhaps in your career preparation, is this the sort of thing that has made you think about government or political action as perhaps a career?
Well, I am sort of thinking about going into environmental law, which is kind of indirectly related because I would be helping with decisions that would affect policymaking and maybe alter or create precedents that have to be followed. So it would help me better understand the process and maybe like wording or like different little things that could help with a decision.
Right, and you know, we've done a lot of work this semester here at North Country Matters on environmental issues and climate issues and things like that. And so it is one of the fields that going forward is going to be critical for all of us. And so that will be a field to go into where you will not have to worry about being busy. You will be busy.
Yeah.
So have you made a decision about college? Where you're going?
Yes, so I am going to Colgate in the fall.
Oh, okay, well, very good. So, thank you. So, last question for you, Hannah. Would you recommend Students Inside Albany to others?
Definitely, 100% yes. It was such a great experience to meet other students that had the same interests as me, and also just like the whole thing, like as a whole, was great.
Well, I'm glad that you got so much out of it because the opportunity is a good one, and I'm glad that as the league, we're finally able to start participating, right, Kathy?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm delighted. It sounds absolutely fascinating experience, and there's only 61 students, you know, from the whole state that can go. I mean, the spaces are limited, and so it's you know, it's a terrific experience, and yeah, we want to you know, now that we're getting to have some, you know, people real experiences, you know, to sort of talk about it, I think it'll be easier for us to you know, spread the scope wider to more schools and that kind of thing, and get the word out about the program, which I think is very good. And you know, the kinds of things and all the, you know, what I mentioned before, that there's you know, local leagues have quite a wide parameter in how they choose, but obviously academic excellence, which Hannah certainly demonstrated abundantly, but you know, academic excellence, interest in civic engagement, you know, and but you know, don't have to be someone who has been that active in it, but interested in it and that kind of thing. And also, you know, students being well-rounded human beings as well. You know, you'd like to. We need empathy at all levels of people thinking about you know, not just political careers or whatever, but activism of any sort. And yeah, the idea of the citizen lobbyist, you know, I mean, that the league is, you know, this is something we believe in very strongly. Because and the term lobbyist often has negative connotations these days, but no, everybody should, you know, present
Activist.
Be active.
Right.
So.
And the nice thing is that when you participate in something like that, we catch you young. So, a lot of people get engaged in civic activity as a result of an incident or a problem that they've encountered in their life, and that can happen at any time. But when someone demonstrates an interest very early, it often is because that's a real important part of their personality, and they're very engaged in their society. So it's nice to see young people who do that, because you have years and years and years of service ahead of you. So Kathy, let's also talk about what some of the other youth programs that the league offers, because Students Inside Albany is actually only one of them.
That's right. It's kind of a flagship sort of thing. But different leagues, programs such as Take Me to Vote, which is for younger kids to encourage their parents to go vote by you know, and there's schools often have contests, you know, how many students, you know, get their parents to vote and whatnot. Student parent mock elections, that can be entertaining and informative, as you can imagine. Activity, Kids Voting USA, Running and Winning, which is a program that is more for college students, and running for student government initially at the college level, but obviously with implications for running for office later in life, and Working Group for Girls.
One of the interesting things that happens every 4 years, along with the presidential election, is that they do a students election. And it's always interesting to see who students pick to be president versus, because this happens before the general election, and it's interesting to see who the students pick versus who actually does get elected. So it's a great way to engage student action and thinking about it early. And of course, in New York State, starting in 2020, 16 and 17-year-olds will be able to pre-register to become voters, and that will give them another opportunity to start to thinking about this process even before they turn 18, when they can actually start to vote. So, so we're definitely going to be offering Students Inside Albany next year. And why is 2020 so special?
Well, it just so happens that 2020 is the anniversary of the passing of the 19th Amendment. And you can bet that the League of Women Voters will be very interested in that anniversary. And so I'm sure that next year's Students Inside Albany will have some sort of, women's history component to it. October is usually when we get the application materials from the State League office, so shortly thereafter we will start.
And the other thing to remember about 2020 is it's actually the 100th anniversary of the founding of the League of Women Voters, which came out of all of the suffrage associations that had worked for 70 plus years to get the right to vote for women. And those women immediately transformed themselves into use the power of the vote after we got it for you. So we've been around for almost 100 years too. So, Kathy, what is the League working on for the summer and fall?
Well, we're going to always, getting voter registration drives and that kind of thing going. This year there's a lot of, informing of voters that we need to do because of early voting in the general election, not in the primaries, but that'll start with the presidential primaries in 2020, but there will be early voting this year for the general election, so we have to get the word out about that and how that all is going to work. So yeah, I think that's going to be our first priority.
And actually, voting reform has been a big item that the legislature has taken on this year, and there's a number of initiatives. So for new voters like yourself, and tell me you're registered to vote, so you'll be able to take advantage of a lot of these new initiatives that New York State has finally put in place, because goodness knows these reforms have been a long time coming, haven't they?
They have.
So, Hannah, is there anything else that you'd like to say as we wrap up? Any final thoughts about Students Inside Albany?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It was just a great experience. So.
Well, thank you for being our representative, and thank you for coming in today to talk about this, because it's a good way to inform other students about what this possibility is, because sometimes when you see something like this posted on a bulletin board, it's sort of hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Right.
So I'm glad your history teacher was able to get you excited about this program, and that you were able to do it. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's all right. Kathy, thank you.
Thank you.
And these conversations are a production of North Country Matters, which is filmed here in the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center of the Pottstown Public Library. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Pottstown Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters. Yeah, thank you so much. It's great. Okay.